Hello, everybody. It's Larry Johnson, your host for Eight Principles Voices. And I'm going to have so much fun today because my guest is Chris Gabriel, like the Archangel. I'm sure you're right up there, Chris. And Chris is a person that has a unique perspective for those who want to understand the hearts and minds of donors because he works with them. He counsels them, he helps them with their philanthropy. So if you're looking to improve your standing with your investors, that's what I call donors, this is the man you need to talk to. So welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you so much, Larry. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be on the program with you.
Thank you. Now, your official title is what?
Well, I wear a couple of different hats in as my wife says, two full-time jobs. I am the founder and president of WISEgenerosity, which is a platform and a program I know we're going to spend some time talking about. I also have a day job, so to speak, running a wealth management practice at a major investment firm that's focused on charity and philanthropy. I actually started my career in the nonprofit sector as a fundraiser and was development director of a national nonprofit organization for about 5 years. And it dawned on me at some point that I had sat at every seat at the giving table, so to speak, as a volunteer and board member and donor, as a fundraiser who was working for an organization looking to raise money, and then as an advisor and counselor to people who have significant resources and are looking to use them purposefully and productively in service to the things they care about. So that realization helped lead down the path that led to WISEgenerosity.
Okay. All right. Um, I've heard it said, well, you probably know our friend Russell James. You know Russell.
Absolutely.
Well, Russell makes the claim, and I think it's pretty well. I mean, with him, it's always about the numbers, and that is that nonprofits generally are only accessing about 15% of what's actually available to them in resources. And I understand that the principle behind that is most nonprofits are focused on income or liquidity as opposed to assets. I'm sure you would agree with that. I mean, that's pretty much you're nodding there. I mean, that's consistent with what your
Well,
experience has been.
it's actually a framework in our process to point out, and again, just looking big picture at where there are resources available to do good in the world. If you break down U.S. household wealth, for instance, about 7% of that wealth is in cash. About 26%, give or take, is in financial assets, stocks and bonds and investments
Excuse
and
me.
such.
And then,
Uh,
and then the rest is
and the
illiquid
rest is
assets.
in what you would call non-financial assets. Now, non-financial assets for many Americans is their home, but for the wealthy Americans and the folks that our listeners are looking to tap into in terms of resources and support, that often is homes, plural. And it's not just homes, it's a whole host of other assets like uh, private business interests or real estate or farms and ranches, oil and gas interests, timber, etc. And because the significant majority of wealth is in those non-financial assets, uh, that's where the opportunity is, I think, that Mr. James is referencing. The reality of giving, though, as our listeners would also acknowledge, is that most giving is done where there is the least money. So if you imagine what I just described as a three-layered pyramid, with
Hmm.
cash at the top as the smallest layer, financial assets in the middle, and then non-financial assets being the base at the bottom, the where giving comes from is flipped. If you survey high net worth and ultra high net worth people, 93% say they give cash. Uh, about 13 or 14% give financial assets, and very few give non-financial assets. And so where the money is not where the asks are happening. And I know one of your main focal points in your work with Eight Principles is pointing in that having a relationship, really a mutual interest in achieving the purpose that the donor has in mind, is an essential prerequisite to really tapping into their full capacity to give. And
Hmm.
often that capacity is really oriented in these more significant non-financial assets. And so it's a big disconnect, and that's actually a major focus of my work professionally and with Wise Generosity.
Um, I like to say that philanthropy is not about money. Money's involved, but it's not about money. Um, and I'm sure you remember the original Miracle on 34th Street, the film,
Absolutely.
of course. Well, there's a scene in that film where the Santa referring people to other stores has really gotten attention. And R.H. Macy, who appeared as himself in the film, which I thought was interesting, he's called up, I forgot who the guy was, but he called up Maureen O'Hara to thank them for this incredible policy that you dreamed up, which they really didn't, but they're going to take credit for it. And at the end of the meeting, he says, there will be a more material expression of my gratitude in your holiday envelope. And I've never forgot a more material expression of her gratitude. That's a good way of describing philanthropy. It's a material expression of something far bigger, far, and yet we have a nonprofit community who makes it all about the material expression, makes it all about the money. Um, and of course, they're in love with the technologists now who think they can totally decipher what someone's going to give, why, and when, using some algorithm that they've come up with, which you and I both know is kind of shake our heads and okay, fine. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's really the essence of the work that we've undertaken at Wise Generosity, is to help to bridge inspiration and application when it comes to giving. I think at our best, when we're engaged in the process of fundraising, we are looking to inspire someone to come alongside us and to address a need or problem in the world to help to make it a better place. That's, I think, what draws people into fundraising as a profession. It's certainly what draws donors to the organizations and causes that we're part of. But there's a disconnect often between that inspiration and then the full application. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to bridge purpose and practice when it comes to giving. And the centerpiece of that, which is something that we may want to explore further, is a framework that we've developed called your personal giving identity. So think a Myers-Briggs test for giving. Imagine if you're sitting across from a donor that you're just meeting for the first time. And rather than fumbling around trying to figure out where they're coming from, what their interests are, what their priorities and preferences are, you had a simple frame of reference that had taken them 5 minutes to complete, where you had a breakdown of what drives them, how to communicate with them in ways that they're going to find most fulfilling and engaging. And getting that conversation off, it's like getting a head start, years worth of relational development in just a few moments. And so we hope and expect that this is going to be a transformational resource. And it very much goes along, Larry, with the whole framework that you've developed, which I've admired for years. Again, this donor-centered model, this relationship-driven rather than transactionally driven approach to fundraising, which from where we started before, unlocks all of this potential to really get into what people care about the most and makes them willing to talk more substantially about the full range of potential ways in which they can provide support, which they're not going to do if all you've asked for and all that they do in response is just write a check, which could be a tiny fraction of what they're capable of doing in support of your organization.
So then this platform, are the clients of the platform the nonprofit or the donor or some combination?
It's a great question. So again, this whole framework is donor-centered. We have a framework that we call optimal giving, and it's a triad. And at the top of the triad is the donor. They're the hero of the story. They're the center of the process, because ultimately our work as fundraisers is about them accomplishing and achieving some higher purpose or calling that they see being able to express through our organization and the work that we do. And so if they're the hero of the story in the center of the process, we as nonprofit fundraisers are the guides. We're there to help them along that path and fulfill their quest, whatever it is. There's a third set of folks involved in these higher level giving conversations, and those are the professional advisors, the attorneys, the accountants, the wealth managers, who also serve and support the donors and help them fulfill their objectives, whatever those are. And so the framework, again,
So
recognizes
then,
the fact that those folks all need to be involved in achieving the best possible outcome for a gift.
so the primary client for you is the organization.
So the way that we've developed this system, the donor is the focus of the effort. It's their personal giving identity, emphasis
Mm-hmm.
on the word personal. It's about them. It's an expression of who they are and what their priorities and preferences are. But our client, customer, so to speak, are the nonprofit fundraisers who are engaged in that guiding process, and also the professional advisors, particularly our colleagues in professional advisory work who are charitably and philanthropically focused in the clients that they serve and in the work that they do. In both of those cases, having this underlying frame of reference, this understanding and awareness of who that person is and what their priorities and preferences are, really enables both the fundraisers and
Mm,
the advisors to do their
okay.
work to its fullest.
Do you have a graphic you can show us?
I have a graphic of this optimal giving relationship, which I will call up. Thank you for the invitation. Uh, there we go, screen share. Uh, so is that up on the screen, Larry?
Not yet. Let me make
All right,
sure that.
let's see here.
Mm,
Start broadcast. Two, one.
okay. All right, we're there.
All right.
Okay.
So this optimal giving framework, again, and it's very much of a piece with your work and with the underlying 8 principles that you share. The With the donor as the center of this conversation, it's their intentions, their purpose, aligned with their capacity, that ultimately is the key to success. And if we're doing our jobs well as nonprofit fundraisers, we're investigating, exploring, and discovering what those intentions are and what that capacity is in our connections with the donor. And then we're the conduit that then aligns those interests, that purpose, with the opportunities and capabilities that our organization offers when it comes to fulfilling those purposes. So how are we as an institution able to help them achieve their quest, their objective? And again,
Well,
we bring our professional advisor colleagues along when appropriate to make sure that the structures and strategies are in place to help that process achieve its full potential. And so there's two underlying aspects of this optimal giving framework. The first is the personal giving identity, which I referenced. Again, what are those drivers? What is the underlying purpose, the priorities and preferences of the giver? The second is also an important question, and certainly one I'm sure that our fundraisers will appreciate. It's also an introduction into a conversation, a thoughtful, structured conversation with a donor about their potential giving capacity. We actually have a calculator that we offer that enables the fundraiser or advisor or the donor themselves, depending on how the tool is shared, to do some basic calculations about them accomplishing every important financial objective they have in their lives, from their own needs to their family, to their legacy, incorporating a healthy margin of safety. And then what the calculator shows is either on an annual basis or as an end of life gift, what their giving capacity is. And the number tends to be much larger than people anticipate. And so again, it reframes the whole conversation around giving in a productive way.
well, I think we spoke about this about the whole idea that the research that's been done. If you're simply going for the immediate cash gift or cash equivalent gift, you're giving out of income primarily. You're only approaching about 15% of what's truly available to more or less any nonprofit, any
Mm-hmm.
constituency. Um, have you found this to be an easy sell with a nonprofit or a hard sell with a nonprofit or
That's a
somewhere in
good
between?
question. So these are new resources and capabilities. We've got a wonderful group of partners that we've aligned with, nonprofits large and small, in order to bring these tools out into the world. The platform through which nonprofits can access the resources I've described is called Advance. And for anyone who's curious, you can learn more at wisegenerosity.com. And there's a section there that will take you to the Advance platform. We have in the works the professional advisor version, which is going to be called Deepen, and which we plan to launch at in 2026. So these are resources that are finding their way into the very successful organizations, and we're seeing real-time evidence of how the needle is being moved on conversations with donors, either new donors or potential donors, or donors that perhaps have been part of the organization for a period of time, but there's an understanding or awareness that they have a higher level of capacity than they've previously demonstrated. And likewise, those higher capacity, higher potential commitment donors that you really want to develop. And let's be honest, it's fundraising is a difficult enterprise. There's a lot of demands. Organizations depend on our ability as professionals to generate resources. There's a lot of effort that goes into determining who the highest potential donors are, and then how to build the relationships, Larry, that you emphasize so well in your work, to build those relationships to the point where they have the potential to achieve their full capacity, to become optimal giving relationships using the framework that we have in
Mm-hmm.
mind. And so these resources are really designed to help with that progression. We talk about being able to catalyze, accelerate, and amplify results when it comes to donor engagement. And so that's what we're seeing take place. We've got a lot of examples of how that might work, but underlying all of this, again, is this basic presumption that donors want to feel more a sense of alignment and purpose with their own values and their own vision. And if we as fundraisers offer them a tool and a resource that enables them to have that sense of self-awareness, and then come alongside them in conversations about how to apply that purpose and translate it into practice through our organization and doing whatever good they want to do in the world, that sets the stage for an incredibly successful long-term relationship where you go far beyond just a transactional gift into something that's truly transformational for both the donor and the organization.
Mm-hmm. Um, I like to say, well, I think we've said that, philanthropy isn't about money. Money's involved, but it's not about the money. And the irony of that is, of course, is that way too often a nonprofit will make it precisely about the money, and they are focused on that number, and they're under this. The fundraiser comes under this pressure to achieve that number for some purpose. We don't know what's going on there, but we see that more and more. And then, you work with high net worth people. You see some of the frustrations that they encounter dealing with nonprofit organizations. I can tell some more stories, but I'd love for you to tell one for the purpose of this.
Well, it's funny because it somewhat cuts both ways, truth be told. And having had this unusual perspective of sitting on both sides of this process, working with donors and having raised money myself as a fundraiser, I think suboptimal outcomes happen for a variety of reasons. One is that the reality of the incentives that you described, Larry, and that organizations need money. They're the lifeblood of work that we do. They're what makes the programs that
Mm-hmm.
we are engaged in possible. Everyone's aware of that. And I think we've all seen organizations that handle that, the necessity of needing to raise money, either thoughtfully, strategically, and relationally, or superficially, selfishly, and transactionally. And
Mm-hmm.
so much of your work really involves around appreciating that distinction. and helping folks go from one side of that equation to the other in terms of how their own work is oriented. An example of that superficial transactional kind of engagement was working with a well-known nonprofit organization here in Atlanta, was helping to advise them on engaging with some of their wealthiest donors, and in fact was in a private meeting with one of their largest, in fact, their very largest benefactor, an organization and a person represented an organization that's well known. If I said who it was, all of your listeners would know. And the comment that was made by the donor in that meeting was something I'll never forget. She said, I'm tired of being treated as an ATM at the intersection of you have money and we need money. Let that sink in for a moment. So here is someone who's literally been involved in giving hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and in this case to an extraordinarily good cause. And she was not, to be clear, sort of tarring the host of our meeting with that brush. She was actually more complimenting them on the fact that she and her family felt a very strong tie to that organization because of the wonderful relationship that had been nurtured and developed going back many, many years. And it was truly a collaborative partnership that they had together, and a tremendous amount of good had been done as a result. But in contrast to that was this alternative experience that she'd had, where again, someone was just treating her as a checkbook and wasn't interested in anything from her beyond the dollar amount that she was able to provide. And what a striking contrast that is between the longtime successful partnership that the donor and the organization had, and this other experience that she had had all too often with groups that were less collaborative and less relationally oriented.
Let's talk a minute about the influence of technology. The big buzz term AI, okay, generative AI to be specific. You and I are old enough to remember the first income asset scans. I think Ben Swaley was the first one that did that. Donor something that they called it. I forgot what it was, and that was back in the '90s when that first made. And and they've been several iterations since. There's a couple of big independent for-profits that are providing these services now, but then they've gone one up from that. And that is, not only are they going to do a scan of the publicly available records, now they've got into this interpretive stuff where they use an algorithm to the point where, and I've heard this in one of the vendors of this, actually use in their ad copy that they can tell you who to ask money for, when, how much, and for what, and under what circumstances. Now, first of all, human nature is not rational. We know that. Okay. It's just not rational. People do all kinds of crazy stuff for various reasons. And for them to make that kind of assertion is, well, I'm a trained engineer, Chris. I've done this sort of thing. I know the limits of those systems.
Sure.
I know the limits of those systems, and yet they present this stuff as though it were magic. And so, but they're so willing to buy. Nonprofits are so willing to buy these services and follow them blindly. Have you seen that impact yourself in your work? Have you seen the impact of this?
Have, and actually just did a post recently about this and the fact that we may be asking the wrong questions as we're going down some of these paths. Even the name artificial intelligence is suggestive because it imagines being smarter and faster and more efficient. Whereas efficiency, and we've learned this in many ways in our world over the course of the last 5 years, I think it was one of the main lessons of COVID. We lived in a just-in-time world that was driven by efficiency, but what it had lost track of was resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to translate that into fundraising, you can point to the potential for us to get more efficient and more targeted, and for the algorithms to be more and more effective at parsing data. But are we doing that in service to the kind of relational collaborative fundraising that you and I are describing? How can that set of inputs lead to that output? Put another way and more simply, uh, uh, I haven't seen yet the technology that is donor focused, donor centered, or donor driven that serves the kind of purpose that the Wise Generosity resources that I described earlier serve. In fact, when I first started sharing some of these resources with colleagues in the field, the head of advancement for one of the uh, largest and most well-known independent schools in the Southeast, uh, literally took us, leaned back, exhaled, and said, "What's amazing about this is it actually puts the donor at the center of the conversation." She said, "We spend all of this money on profiling tools and systems and other things that are really designed to help us figure out who has money and how much. But none of them actually ask the donor, what do you care about and what are you interested in?" And if we're missing that piece of the question and of the conversation, then we're not going to get very far. And all of the intelligence and technology in the world is ultimately futile if you don't put the donor at the center of that conversation. And so the great contrast between artificial intelligence uh, is wise generosity. And wise is an acronym. It stands for well-grounded, inspired, satisfying, and effective. And in the same
Ooh,
way
that's
that
clever,
wisdom,
Chris. That is. Did
well,
you did you dream that up?
did indeed.
All right.
Uh, uh, the In the same way that I think our society doesn't pay adequate attention to wisdom, wisdom is what the ancients prized. It was a combination of values and experience. It reflected what was important to you and also reflected the kind of life you'd lived and the things that you'd learned along the way. Uh, you know, Gray hairs are valued in societies over time because you learn things along the way. And part of what you learn is what's important and what isn't, and how to connect with people in ways that are meaningful, and other things that technology just doesn't really help us much with. And
No.
so I do worry, to get back to your question, that there's a lot of effort and application potentially of these new tools and resources, but they're not necessarily leading down the path that leads to the kind of fulfilling transformational relationships that hopefully all of our listeners and viewers want to be having with their donors. And that's really what 8 principles are designed to help promote. And that's what Wise Generosity aims to do likewise.
Hmm. Yeah, I just uh, unfortunately, from my viewpoint, there are way too many nonprofit leaders who are technologically naive, and they really latch on to this because um, they want clarity, they want immediacy, um, and let's face it, human nature's messy, Chris. Uh, Things aren't all that clear, and they're not that concise, and it takes, getting there is often a very circuitous route to achieve what we're hoping to achieve, and it takes time, and it takes well, I would say an honest interest in the
Mhm.
investor.
An honest interest in the investor. I love that, Larry. And that really is the key to this. I'm going to share another item if you don't mind. I
Sure.
think it might add some clarity for our viewers and listeners. Some of these things I'm describing around wise generosity tools and resources may seem interesting but abstract. I'm going to make that more concrete, if I may. And again, it
Please.
comes back to this idea of wise. A wise gift that's well grounded, inspired, satisfying, and effective is one that's thoughtfully prepared. It's highly motivated. It ultimately produces, and so those are the inputs. That's the W and the I.
Mm.
And then the output that it produces are satisfying to the donor. And that ought to be our number one objective as fundraisers, is to produce outcomes that help our investors feel that they are so happy that they provided the resources that we needed to do our work and are honored and excited to be part of it. And that will happen in part because we're good stewards of those resources. we fulfill our promises, and we produce effective outcomes. But all of this gets back to this idea of a donor-focused model, which aligns with both of our approaches to this work. And I'm going to share the screen to give our audience a better sense of what this personal giving identity is that I referenced before. Again, it's a concept that unless you'd heard me speak before or had come across wise generosity in some other context, you're not going to be familiar with. And so with that in mind, allow me to share the following. This is an example of a personal giving identity profile, happens to be my own. And again, this is the result of a 22-question patent pending survey that takes about 5 minutes to complete. It's simple, it's multiple choice, and people love doing things like this. It's why Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and DISC and all of these other frames of reference that are out in the world and have worked their way into applications in various ways, professionally and personally, are so popular and so enduring, is because people love this sense of self-discovery and self-awareness. But as a practitioner and someone who'd been in this space for a long time, both as a fundraiser and as an advisor, I realized that there wasn't anything similar that addressed giving. And wouldn't it be great to have such a resource? And when the Wise Generosity book was published, we took some of the key frames of reference about being an effective giver, and we built them into this tool that we're now making available widely. So personal giving identity. In my case, there are well, in every case, there are 4 components to PGI, as we call it. What is your generosity personality type? What is your preferred expression of giving? What is your primary driver of giving? And then what is your underlying motivation for giving? And in my case, I'm an expressive, problem solver, intuitive, and convicted giver. Well, that's difficult to digest unless you have the context. And so appreciating that we'll just spend a minute on this more as an introduction. And again, folks can follow up to learn more through our website at wisegenerosity.com. These elements of personal giving identity in these 4 categories. First is generosity personality type. Well, there are 4 personality types. Givers are either focused, expressive, considerate, or disciplined. They're either get to the point, tell me what you want, and let me decide, which is focused. They're expressive, which means that they're story-driven, connective. They want to really feel a part of whatever cause it is that they're involved with. Considerate givers are more thoughtful, compassionate, definitely people-oriented and conscientious. They tend to take longer to make up their minds about giving, but once they give, they tend to be the most committed out of all the types. And then disciplined givers are like your engineers. They're very much process-driven, practical, and outcome-oriented. So imagine walking into a conversation with a donor that you don't know or don't know well. Armed with just that piece of information, you have a great starting point to make sure that that conversation is as productive and effective as it could be. And if you want to test that out for yourself, as an intro to the whole advanced platform that I referenced earlier, if you go to the Wise Generosity webpage, there's a resources section, and there is a 7-question quiz, which is, in essence, a highlight of the overall personal giving identity assessment that allows you or anyone else to determine your generosity personality type. So I encourage folks to go there and check that out as an introduction into this system. The other elements, just very quickly, your expression of giving. Are you more people-focused or more of a problem solver? In other words, are you more charitable or more philanthropic in terms of the giving that you do? Your driver of giving is how you make giving decisions. Are you more head-driven or more heart-driven? Are you more
Well,
emotional or more analytic in
and I
terms
would
of
like
how
to
you decide to
suggest,
give?
I'd like to suggest that it's never 100-0 in either
Correct.
way. It's a mixture. It's a scale, goes back and forth. Keep going. I'm sorry. Just want to make
Oh,
that.
no worries. And you're absolutely right in that as well, Larry. In fact, that this basic output that I'm sharing here basically shows what the leading element is in each of these different categories.
Mm,
There is a more sophisticated version, which we're in the process of finalizing, that will actually break down all of this analysis into a more refined version where you would actually show on each scale from 0 to 10, with 5 being in the middle, where are you? And for instance, my expression of giving is very closely balanced between being people helping and being problem solving. And a lot of others might be the same, or you might be really one towards one side or the other. The last piece of the 4 is motivation for giving, which is a shorthanded way of evaluating how experienced and committed someone is to the giving process. And there's a hierarchy of 4 different outputs there: compulsion, connection, conviction, and compassion. And one of the wonderful things about fundraising, and one of the drivers of this whole system, is the idea that as guides, and I used that word before, I believe, fundraisers in essence are guides. Again, our donors are the heroes on a grand quest to make the world better. And we have this tremendous opportunity to come alongside them and get to know them and support them in that effort, and to help introduce the aspects of our organization that are going to be the most fulfilling to them in their generosity journey. One of the things that we also are able to do in that process is to help them get better at giving. And so motivation in particular is not fixed. As time goes on and as people get more familiar with and more comfortable with their giving, it gets more wise, well-grounded, inspired, satisfying, and effective. And one of the great blessings and benefits that we have potentially as fundraisers is to help folks along the journey. And it's often not just an individual, of course. It could be a couple or an entire family. And we've got variations of this personal giving identity tool that help to show how couples align or how whole families align in terms of their individual and collective approach to giving. And so all these are ways in which, again, we're putting the donor at the center of the process. We're enabling and empowering them to be as successful and effective as possible in accomplishing their objectives. And we get to be part of that. And of course, our organizations get to benefit from really building those long-term sustainable transformational relationships.
Now, as I looked at this in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I can hear a nonprofit now saying, well, this works well and good if you're just going for the quote big money. And we have to start somewhere and blah, 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 blah. I would think, and this is a question, just an idea. I would think that if you were sophisticated enough, you could actually develop different profiles of your direct mail and social media work that would fit these things, that would enable you to draw people with the different profiles.
Absolutely, Larry. Again,
Um,
great minds think alike. Uh,
well, because see, that would go against some of the typical ways of dividing your larger constituency. You know, the Libon, Cybont, all based on renewal, blah 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 blah. Well, that works to a point, but it doesn't attack any of this, which is when you get into the serious giving, because even the quote serious givers don't start at that level.
That's exactly right. So if our donor development process is something of a funnel, analogy gets used often, and we're looking to put people in at the top of that. What is the intake in the input? And then how do we engage with them and work them through a process of getting to know them better, having them be more involved with our organization. As we get to know them better, we figure out who has high capacity or high commitment. That would be those would be the relationships that we would want to spend the most time cultivating, and ultimately getting to the point where we're working on the transformational gifts, which to some degree are the people that have the highest capacity, or I would argue the highest commitment. As you know, we all know that the classic planned gift profile is a donor that may have been given for years and years at relatively small amounts, but doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
children, and feels this high level of commitment to the organization. And as a result, is a perfect candidate for someone to make who might be interested in making a legacy gift. So we have to be able to figure all that out. But to your point, let's just look specifically at the generosity personality types, which is the best practice that we have been working with our partners and subscribers now to help them implement. If you, through different channels, as part of a thank you for a donor who's made an initial contribution, as part of the welcome package that you give to someone who's volunteered or visited your organization for the first time, whatever it is, as you're beginning that process of engaging with folks, if you include the generosity personality type as part of that initial donor engagement process, and you encourage them to do the 7 questions. Again, it takes 60 to 90 seconds. Tends to be something that they're interested in and curious about. Our subscribers get an alert when someone has completed that process and are able to then file the resulting personality type into their donor management system. And what we're working with folks to do is then to start to segment their communications subsequently based on these 4 different profiles. So rather than sending out a single generic end of year appeal, for instance, as an email or even as printed correspondence, you would send 4 different versions, each of which would be focused on the particular personality types of the
Love
4
this.
different personalities.
I love this. And you can actually make this available to your giving constituency as a service.
That's right.
And I would think, and I'm just lying, I would think that the what I would call the mission-directed organizations that would include faith-based organizations would find this very appealing to make it available to their giving constituencies.
Absolutely. And we have a set of resources that are developed specifically for faith-forward organizations to align those sort of values-driven kind of spiritual frames of reference into this system. For instance, for organizations that are Jewish or Christian, we have a presentation that shows how the generosity personality types relate to biblical figures. And so people can sort of picture themselves as a certain type of giver, along with a character that they'd be familiar with from the Bible. Same thing can be done in other contexts as well. So I think you and our audience have the sense. What this is all designed to do is really help provide frames of reference that are donor focused and donor centered, and that are going to enable us to do our work better, to communicate more effectively, to build relationships more quickly, that end up being stronger relationships that ultimately lead to larger gifts and more sustained success for our organizations. And at the end, these are the fundamental building blocks of having those types of transformational relationships. So
when you have a faith-based individual with means, they feel a compulsion, sometimes a burden, to be mindful about what they're doing. I'm shifting slightly here. A lot of the wealth management community, the financial management community, this is something that they're not comfortable with. They don't know where to go with this because they're focused on the numerical aspects of it, and then a lot of them are just flat out ignorant of what's available in terms of the giving vehicles and how that would accomplish certain means. So if you have a wealth manager who's focused totally on tax avoidance, that's a very small slice of what these people are concerned about. In fact, I mean, the numbers I've always seen place primary motivation for tax avoidance down around number 20 or 21. And that's why I always kind of smile to myself, Chris, every time they change the deductibility rules in DC, and there's a whole swath of the nonprofit community that goes into meltdown. And I'm like, just stop right now. Just stop. That is such such what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Red herring. It's such a red herring.
I think the economists would call that a marginal driver of gifting decisions, particularly for our more generous donors. But I imagine many of our listeners have had an experience where perhaps they did build a strong relationship with a donor, and there was discussion underway about a significant gift, and that donor in turn took that outlined opportunity back to their advisor, who dumped cold water on it for some reason. And often that's because they didn't really understand what was going. They didn't want to be outside their area of competence or comfort. Yeah. And in extreme cases, there are even misaligned incentives along those lines. If you're a wealth manager paid for assets under management and you're encouraging clients to give away assets, that's somewhat counterproductive to your business. So one of my major objectives is to be an advocate within the professional world among peers who are wealth managers or accountants or attorneys, to help encourage and support them in being able to have these kinds of conversations with their clients more effectively, which in turn further reinforces the excellent work that so many fundraisers do in helping to create these opportunities and to work collaboratively and consultatively with donors. And there are groups out there like Plain Giving Councils in various communities. And I've been active here in Georgia, in the Georgia Plain Giving Council for many years. Those are forums, if you're not involved with those already, outside of some of the other professional organizations that fundraisers might be involved in, the Plain Giving Councils exist to bring professional advisors and fundraisers together to mutually reinforce each other's work in helping clients make substantial transformational planned or legacy gifts. And so shout out to my friends in the planned giving world who are involved in those organizations, because they do a lot of good. But there are many other advisors, to your point, Larry, that just don't understand this. And part of my hope is that we can give them some tools and resources and a level of comfort and confidence so that they don't stand in the way of good being done through their clients being able to make substantial gifts.
Well, I'm an abundance guy. And one thing that I believe is that by being adopting an abundant frame of reference, whether it's directly related to money or relationships or opportunities, whatever it is, that if you are feel that there's more than enough for everyone, and that by being abundant, in your point of view, abundance comes back to you. But that can be a difficult sell to someone who's zero sum, and especially a financial advisor who sees it only in terms of near-term balance sheets, and that can be difficult.
It is a challenge, and I'll give you another example, if I may, because this is something that I'm concerned about with the whole profession of professional advisory work. Is based on what I think is a misunderstanding of the nature and purpose of wealth. So having made that provocative statement, I'll share another screen to illustrate the point. If you are involved in financial planning, for instance, there's an underlying assumption into most financial planning that the purpose of the planning itself is to create a graph that looks something like this, which is I call the fallacy of limitless upward sloping wealth.
That's a mouthful, Chris.
It is a mouthful, but I want people to kind of trip over that a bit as they process what it means. uh, perhaps our audience has participated in a financial planning process themselves. Perhaps they've seen the output of such financial planning models that people like me and my colleagues in the field produce. But many, if not most of them, particularly for people of considerable means, look something like this. Where as they start out and as compounding takes over time, the line keeps sloping upward and upward and upward, because the person does not have enough money, has enough money that they're not going to spend it all during their lifetime. And they may have some amount that they want to pass along to family. But depending on how much they have, you have to start asking questions about, well, how much? And the whole point of this graph is to say, is the point of you having wealth just to hold on to it so there is as much as possible when you die? And then what?
And by the way, when you
Yeah.
say that, there are people who just, even though they would disagree with this statement, they tacitly believe they're not going to die.
Well, that's another topic. But in our planning work, we try to and again, gently, carefully, respectfully introduce a couple of different concepts, which at their heart, Larry, are abundance-driven frames of reference. The first working title of the book that became Wise Generosity was actually The Abundance Imperative, which was rejected partly because it was also a mouthful. But also the topic grew more broadly to involve generosity as a whole. But this idea of having an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset, I think, is one of the key decisions each of us make in life. And it is a choice. And it's a choice that we reinforce and develop as a habit. But ultimately, we get to decide whether we want to live with an open hand or not. And part of that in the context of wealth, and I'm presenting this in part just as a frame of reference for our audience, as they're thinking about the clients with whom they're working, they may have had these thoughts themselves at one point, thinking, well, gosh, I know, you're writing me a check for this amount. Put aside the fact that it probably should be an appreciated asset rather than a check. But I'm, imagine, or what my screening system tells me here is that you're worth vast amounts. I think it might be easy for us to look down on the very wealthy who aren't as generous as they could or should be. But a lot of it's because they just don't have the frames of reference that a lot of what Wise Generosity is designed to do, to both present them with a sense of identity and purpose around giving, but also in that potential giving capacity side to unlock their sense of potential in their ability to give, and not even sacrificially give, still accomplish the material things that they've decided that they want. Of course, the most generous people are the people that give sacrificially and are willing to curtail their own needs and opportunities for the sake of benefiting others. Certainly, those are many of the folks that I admire the most in terms of their generosity. But the idea of this graph ultimately is this line just supposed to go up and up and up forever until it ends? Or are we supposed to start to use money for the benefit of those we care about earlier in life when they can benefit from it more than when we're dead? Because hopefully, if we've lived a good long life, by the time we're passed away, our kids are going to be pretty advanced in age also.
Yes.
It would have been most helpful to help them when they were younger in life and might have needed more help. And then
not now.
not now when their financial circumstances are all pretty well sorted out, hopefully. Maybe it's grandkids or great grandkids at that point. But even beyond loved ones, Warren Buffett is retiring as the head of Berkshire Hathaway today, as a legend and one of the wealthiest people in the world. He famously said at one point, and it should be the motto of any financial planner, that he wanted, particularly the one who's working with very wealthy people, that his goal was to provide enough money for his children that they could do anything they want, but not so much that they could do nothing.
He was asked. He was asked at one point when he made that pledge, that pledge to Gates, or whatever. He was asked, well, why are you not giving any more money to your children? And his response was, what? and make them crazy.
So, uh, you know, all of this gets back to wisdom. Ultimately, what is
Mm-hmm.
wise? How do we treat ourselves? How do we provide for our families in ways that are thoughtful? It's not too much and not too little. And then ultimately, how do we do good? Because within this framework, there's a sense in which, and I think there's a slide here in this deck, which, by the way, was one I did for the local estate planning council here. This was a presentation earlier in the year for a group of attorneys, uh, uh, encouraging them to be as focused in on charitable and philanthropic planning as possible, and giving them some resources to use in that regard. But this idea that most of our money is for ourselves with the family and then maybe some going to other causes, that's how most people think. But those that
Mm-hmm.
I know who are truly generous and who I would argue are truly wealthy kind of flip that script. They certainly, in most cases, don't deprive themselves and live perfectly comfortable lives, but they're not extravagant. It's the old millionaire next door mentality. They
You know,
provide a legacy for their families, but one that's reasonable and in keeping with what will be beneficial to their children rather than detrimental. And if they have lots of money, that leaves lots of money available to do good in the world. And that's
um,
one of the great blessings and benefits of my professional life is I get to help individuals and families engage in these kinds of planning opportunities in ways that produce what hopefully are truly beneficial outcomes, optimal outcomes for everyone involved.
I was um, I'm thinking of people who have they're what I'd call a high earning self-employed professionals.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a big group of that would be physicians, as an example. Okay, now the medicine's becoming a little more corporate and this kind of thing, but still, I've talked to some people, or even people who own businesses, another group, um, where they have deliberately and consciously said, okay, I need only X to live on each year.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I'm generating X plus. Um, what do I do with the plus? And I remember I'm thinking of a very specific gentleman who I worked with, physician, and at the time I forgot, it was some specialty in medicine, and he, at the time, this was 20 years ago, he was generating like 500 or 600 a year, and he said all I need's 200 to live on, or 150. So what do I do with the rest of this? You see, and he didn't want to just stack it up in the storehouse. Well, it was a Christian man. What's the parable? Why do you need to build bigger and bigger storehouses? What are you going to do with it? What's going to happen? Don't you know that your life's going to be demanded of you tomorrow? Hello, what are you doing this for? And he was already in tune with that. But I think a lot of people just haven't thought that far ahead, Chris.
Yeah. And I think, circling back again to our audience, I think it's one of the great benefits that really good fundraisers provide, particularly those who get to work in this higher end gift planning
Mm-hmm.
space where you're having these types of strategic conversations with people of means, and you are providing them with an incredible service, enabling them to think through some of these questions and provide perspectives and frames of reference. You're able to take advantage of some of the tools that are out there in the world to support the conversations, including some that are available through WISEgenerosity. And for me personally, that's the most satisfying work that I can do, is to be involved in those higher level, thoughtful conversations that are focused, again, on wisdom. How do I, and wisdom is often a question of balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are current needs and there are future needs. There are competing influences and priorities. How do you account for all of those in a thoughtful, sensible way and orient your purpose so that it can achieve practical effect? The subtitle of the WISEgenerosity book is A Guide to Purposeful and Productive Living and Giving. It really is about the essence of what makes life meaningful and worthwhile. and hopes to be a reference. The book's not written for professionals. It's written for the public. It's written to give someone of any age or stage of life a sense of purpose and power that comes from being generous, and not just with money. There are 5 different types of generosity that are covered in the book. Possessional generosity is just the first of those, and frankly, the least significant. The others are personal generosity, which is time and talent; social generosity, which is everything from hospitality and manners to civic duty; emotional generosity, which is getting close to home, being available and accessible and even vulnerable to the people that we're close to. And ultimately, all of those feed into the highest form of generosity, which was relational generosity. And really, our lives come back to the quality of the relationships that we have and the people that we're surrounded by, and to be a representative of a nonprofit organization that's able to build a relationship, kind of coming full circle in the conversation, to draw someone into an opportunity to participate in the important work that our organization is doing, life-changing, life-giving work in many cases. That's an incredible gift. And I know there are folks outside the profession, many view fundraising as something kind of scary, and gosh, how could you do that? I don't think there's anything that could be more fulfilling and rewarding than proper fundraising, well done and wisely done, because it taps into everything that's essential and good about life, and again, it helps someone else fulfill a quest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And does good all the while for our organization that's doing something important and meaningful. And again, I've always found that to be incredibly rewarding, and I hope and expect that our audience does likewise.
Well, I tell people that the number one roadblock to being an effective fundraiser, whether professional or lay, is having a dysfunctional view of money. Not knowing what it really is supposed to serve, what's its relationship with you, with others. They don't. Oh, and then in the more unsophisticated markets, how money can be used, and how it can be used in ways that are pretty creative, and where literally everybody wins. Everybody wins. Here, I want to get it. I love what you've done. I love this. Okay. And we're going to talk more about how we might work together later. But my little shtick is what we call the triple wind, where we have the community up here. It's an isosceles triangle. Community here. You have the philanthropists or the donors here, and you have the nonprofit here. And all 3 parties are involved, and they all should win, but for different reasons.
That's right.
For instance, the philanthropist is fulfilling something that's very essential to them in fulfilling their life. They have a reason for doing this. By giving through, I like to say, a nonprofit, they are facilitating that. The nonprofit benefits because they can then execute on their mission. And then the community benefits because they're the recipients of that. So they all 3 benefit for different reasons. So I'll often I'll ask a nonprofit executive, so who are your customers? And of course, I get a lot of what really are the people they benefit. You see, this whole idea of shareholders, stakeholders. No. Your customers are the philanthropists who provide the engine of growth, the financial resources to make this possible. And that's who your customers are. You should be focused on them in a way that makes that possible. And so as a result of that, those who benefit are your benefactors, your recipients, the people who benefit from this. So there you go. Anyway.
Well, that may be a great place to end, Larry. And I often begin presentations with a very similar framework. And I love that model that you just shared. We phrase a lot of what we do in terms of transformational generosity. And the idea about optimal giving is that it truly is transformational in ways that no other human behavior that I know is, because of the 360-degree benefit that everyone who participates in the process receives from it. So our framework is an upward sloping line. And at the base, it says giving changes the giver for the better. It changes the receiver for the better. It changes the community of which they're a part for the better. And ultimately, it changes the world for the better. And that kind of transformational power really does make giving something that's a uniquely powerful and positive human behavior. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir for our audience in terms of seeing the work that they do in those terms. But I'd like to tip my hat to our audience and just say to each of you, thank you for the part that you play in creating those opportunities for transformation through your work. And thank you, Larry, for providing the platform and this amazing frame of reference, this transformational concepts built around the 8 principles that I know everyone would be well served to continue to focus on and adopt. And it's certainly been a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, likewise, Chris, it's been my pleasure. And I'm sure our audience will find it also of great worth. We've been talking to Chris Gabriel, who is the proverbial two-headed monster. He has wealth management, and then he also does this wise generosity, optimal giving. There he is. Hey, you look pretty good in that picture there, Chris.
Here's our WISEgenerosity.com website. Anyone who's been listening who wants to learn more can go there and check it out. But thank you again, Larry.
Well, we're going to be doing another one of these very soon, our audience, and there'll be somebody else who has a particular point of view and a particular story. And I want to thank you again, Chris, and thank our audience for the time that you've invested in us.
Thank you.